بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد ولله الحمد والمنة. We praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we thank Him for the opportunity to talk about one of the most important books of Islam, and that is the Ṣaḥīḥ of Imām Muslim ibn Hajjaj ibn Muslim al-Qushayri al-Naysaburi. And one of the reasons that I had chosen this book is that this is a book that gets less attention than its more famous Sahih counterpart, which is al-Bukhari. And interestingly enough, what is the relationship of Imam Bukhari to Imam Muslim? Does anyone know? Imam Bukhari was one of Imam Muslim's teachers. So much so that, and we'll talk about it bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, that when given the choice between one teacher and Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim chose Imam Bukhari, even though Imam Bukhari was persecuted toward the end of his life. And Imam Bukhari himself, he died alone. He died alone. It was just him and just one of his students in this place called Khartanq, which was outside, like toward the Caspian Sea today. So beginning in the life of Imam Muslim, which is something that is very important for us to understand for a number of reasons. The first of them is understanding who he was. So like we said, his name is Muslim ibn Hajjaj ibn Muslim ibn Ward ibn Kawshad Abu al-Husayn al-Qushayri nasaban. So over here you have a number of scholars that say that he was actually Arab. From them, Ibn Salah, and from them also Imam al-Nawawī. Ibn Salah and Imam al-Nawawī themselves very famous shurrah, or very famous explainers of the collection of Imam Muslim Sahih. Also Imam al-Dimyati, he also claimed this, Imam al-San'ani, Ibn al-Athir, and Imam al-Dhahabi also mentions this. But there are some scholars who say that لَعَلَّهُ كَانَ مِن مَوَالِي, that it is possible that he is from the Mawali. Now, a Mawla is somebody who comes from a family of freed slaves of a particular tribe or from a particular people. So what happens is that in Islam there are a few ways to pass on your name. There are a few ways to pass on your name, and one of them is not from a husband to a wife, right? A wife is supposed to maintain her name. She does not take her husband's name. But there are other ways to pass it on is through blood and muwala, or this idea of a freed slave. So when a slave is freed in Islam, he can actually take the family name of his master. So that was one of the claims of Imam Muslim. Which makes another very interesting point, that if we assume and if we claim that Imam Muslim was actually Ajami, then this would make the two greatest muhaddithin, or the two greatest hadith scholars in Islam, to be not from the from where? From the Arab. And this is a very important point also. And this is something I like emphasizing time and again, not because the majority of scholars in Islam were not Arab, right? That's not the point I'm trying to make. But the point that within a short period of time, because Imam Muslim, he died 262, Imam Bukhari, he died 256, so you're talking about within 3 generations of the rise of Islam and the spread of Islam, not only did you have people who were not native to the religion, who were not Arab, but these individuals actually became scholars and imams and leaders in a religious capacity within Islam. Because even today, the highest graded, if I want to authentically attribute something to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the best way for me to attribute that would be to say that this is something that is found in Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim Sahih. And if we agree that if a hadith is in Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim Sahih, the chance of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying this are extremely, extremely, extremely high. And this is the most trusted of understandings and the most trusted of a hadith that we have. So Imam Muslim himself, he was born in Naysabur, right? He was born in Naysabur, and there is a difference of opinion on the year that he was born. So there you have a differences of opinion. He was born in Naysabur. Naysabur, also another important point. Naysabur is where today? I'm speaking too quickly. I'll try to slow down, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Yes, Imam Muslim, he was born in Naysabur. Naysabur is where? Naysabur. Yeah.
What is that?
You tell me. I'm asking. He was born in Iran. Ahsant. Iran. Our history, our Islamic history, many of the muhaddithin, where are they from? So you have Razi, you have Ray, you have Naysabur, you have Sijistan. All of these places are in modern day where? They're in Iran. So our hadith tradition, our strongest hadith scholars, they come from what is modern day Iran. The only thing that changed, so you're talking about one of the greatest historical Sunni strongholds, was in now what is the greatest Shi'i stronghold. And whenever we talk about Iran, we automatically associate it with who? With the Shia. But if you find and you look in our history, and this is something that you're talking about until the 5th century of Islam, was a predominantly, not just predominantly Sunni, because even Imam al-Ghazali, where was he from? He is also from Iran. He's from Tus. So all of these places, and he spoke what? You know, he spoke Arabic and another language. He spoke Farsi also. Even some of Imam Muslim's teachers, they spoke Farsi. So it is not strange to see all of these people and all of these individuals and all of these muhaddithin, yani these great scholars of hadith, to come from this place, and how history has changed, and how when we look in our perspective on certain places and certain people and certain things. So here, he, rahimahullah ta'ala, he was born, not only was he born there, but he also died there. He began seeking knowledge when he was 14 years old. So Imam Muslim, when he was 14 years old, the first trip that he took, he actually made Hajj with his father. And on that trip to Hajj, he started going around in different places. From the first of them, obviously Makkah. And from there, he began studying and sitting with a number of different mashayikh and a number of different ulama, to the point that there are a number of scholars, and from them Ibn Salah, who mentioned that he sat with over 200 shuyukh. He sat with over 200 shuyukh. He was extremely, extremely well traveled. This individual was not one who just sat in Naysabur. He is someone who went from Naysabur, which is modern day Iran, to Makkah, to major parts of the Muslim world. He went to Egypt, he went to Sham, he went to Khurasan, he went to all of these major centers of knowledge, and he took different mashayikh, and he took different narrations from all of these different places. Imam Muslim, he continued seeking knowledge until he reached the point where he wanted to write his Ṣaḥīḥ. And one of the reasons that he actually wrote his Ṣaḥīḥ is because he had a friend who was with him, who was a friend and a student. And his name was Ahmad ibn Salama al-Bazzar. Not to be confused with the famous Imam Abu Amr al-Bazzar, who was a muhaddith in his own right. But this individual not only was his friend, but he was also his student. And he was with him, and he actually approached him. And he said to him, "Why do you not write something about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in gathering his narrations?" And when we get to Imam Muslim's Muqaddimah, when we get to his introduction, he is actually addressing him. He's actually addressing him and talking to him and giving him the reasons of why he wrote this book and why he put it together. So Imam Muslim, if we actually look, and unfortunately I don't have a projector to show the map, but he started in where is the north. Iran is a plateau, right? So Iran is a very big plateau, and he started from the north of Iran. From there he went to Mecca, and then he went up past Medina, toward Tabuk. He went to Egypt, and then he came into what is now modern day Palestine, and then he traveled again back to Khurasan. So he did like this big kind of circle, traveling around to the different parts of the Muslim world, rahimahullah ta'ala. So from his most famous teachers, we have already mentioned, was who? Bukhari. Imam Bukhari was his most famous teacher. And it is from him he learned ilal. Ilal is the science of hidden defects in a hadith. So what is a hidden defect? A hidden defect is when you have a hadith that looks sound. If I looked at the hadith and I wasn't a hadith scholar, I would look at this hadith and I'd say, okay, well this hadith seems okay. It seems good. But you have a handful of scholars, from them Imam Bukhari, from them Imam Muslim, from them Imam al-Nasa'i, from them Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, from them Imam al-Darqutni, who these individuals, they would actually look at the hadith, and even though it looked sound, it looked correct, it looked upright, they actually understood that there was a defect and there was a fault in the hadith. And because they understood, they were able to look just sometimes at the text. Sometimes they would be able to look at just the narrators, and they would be able to say, well, these two people actually never narrated from each other. That this person is not actually his student. Or they say, oh, the problem here is that he took this isnad and he put it on this matan. He put it on this text of the hadith. But they had this ability to differentiate between that. So for those who sit in my hadith class, this science of ilal, this science of understanding hidden defects in hadith is a very, very unique and a very precise science. And one of the reasons that the scholars of ilm, or the scholars of these defects in these hadith, were so familiar with it, was because their ears had become attuned to what? They were constantly, what were they listening to, and what were they talking about, and what were they hearing? They were hearing the Prophet ﷺ. So every time the more they became familiar with how the Prophet ﷺ spoke, every time they became more familiar with his actions, every time they became more familiar with what he said and what he did and how he acted, the moment something seemed out of place, the moment a word became strange, they say, this is not how the Prophet ﷺ spoke, and it would allow them to go and explore the hadith in more depth, saying that there's a problem here and there's an issue here. And this is how the scholars of ilal, or the scholars of hidden defects, worked. Another one of his famous teachers was Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. Now, Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he was a major scholar in his own right. This was during a time that we know to be the Mihna, or the time where there was testing that was going on between the different people and the different scholars concerning the creation of the Quran. So what happened was that Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he accused Imam Bukhari of being from his opponent. And he said one day, he said that whoever wants to continue sitting with Bukhari has to leave my majlis, has to leave my gathering. From the people who left his gathering were who? Our author, Imam Muslim ibn Hajjaj al-Muslim. Sorry. This is something that we call nowadays academic integrity. That they understand when something is true, regardless of how many people or the number of scholars, because with Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, he actually sat longer. He actually sat longer with him than he did with Imam Bukhari. But this shows the sincerity of Imam Muslim himself, that the moment that he recognized this individual's knowledge, the moment he recognized his caliber, he was able to leave Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli, saying that this standing that you're on is wrong. This position that you have taken is wrong, and Imam Bukhari is an imam of his own right in and of himself, and he deserves to be listened to and studied under. Now the only shortcoming in all of this, in this whole picture, is that Imam Muslim, he had already finished writing his Ṣaḥīḥ by the time he met Imam Bukhari. So you will find that the one person that Imam Muslim does not narrate from in his Ṣaḥīḥ is Imam Bukhari. He actually narrates from Muhammad ibn Yahya al-Dhuhli. Even though Imam Muhammad, he actually negated him and he warned against him because he started sitting with Bukhari. But even then, he still narrates from him, again, showing the sincerity of the author. That even if his teacher and his sheikh is warning from him, he still has the academic integrity to report from the sheikh who now is warning from him. But because he sat with him, or because he left studying with him, he already completed writing his Ṣaḥīḥ, he did not report from Imam Bukhari. Another one of his famous teachers, Muhammad ibn Khalid al-Saksaki, and another one of his famous teachers is Ali ibn Ja'd al-Baghdadi, and there are a number. He sat with Imam Ahmed, he also sat with Ishaq ibn Rahway, he also sat with Ishaq ibn Kosaj, he also sat with Al-Hasan ibn Ali al-Hudari, he also sat with Muhammad ibn Imran and Zuhair ibn Harb, and the list goes on and on and on. There are, majority of the Mashayikh who actually reports from in his Ṣaḥīḥ, he reports from about 90, even though they number over 200. Imam Muslim also, he has a number of other works. He has a number of other works that we will talk about, inshallah. But from his famous students, Ibrahim ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad ibn Nuh, Ahmed ibn Hamdun, Ahmed ibn Salama, probably one of the more famous ones, Ahmed ibn Hassan ibn Shadan. He also has Ahmed ibn Mubarak, Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Hassan, Muhammad ibn Saburi, Zakaria ibn Dawood, Sayyid ibn Amr, Salih ibn Muhammad, and on and on and on. Again, a number of students that took from him, studied with him, benefited from him. But those who narrated his Muslim, those who narrated his Ṣaḥīḥ, there are four famous narrators. There are four famous narrators of Imam Muslim's Ṣaḥīḥ. The most famous of them are Ibrahim ibn Muhammad ibn Sufyan Abu Ishaq al-Naysaburi. And it's from him that we actually received the Ṣaḥīḥ, that we have the copy that we received today. It is from him. The other three narrators that there are is Abu Muhammad al-Qalanisi and Maki ibn Abdan. So he has, there are two, I think there was Ahmed ibn Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Muhammad al-Naysaburi, Abi ibn Sharqi. So from these four, the most famous one, and the narration that we actually have that has reached us today is from Ibrahim ibn Muhammad. And it's from them there are about 5 layers of narration that come after them, ending with the most famous, probably compiler of Imām Muslim, but not the author, but the author is Imām Muslim himself, but the one who compiled it was Imām Zabidi. He actually has his own mukhtasar, he has his own abridged version. Right, he has his own abridged version of Ṣaḥīḥ Muslim. Also, Imām Muslim was recognized by his peers. He was one who was held in very, very high status. So over here we have a narration about him where some of the Husayn ibn Mansur, he says, سمعت العساكر الراهوي ذكر مسلما فقال بالفارسية كلام معناه أي رجل يكون هذا. So over here, Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, who was an Imam and a Muhaddith, a great scholar of Hadith in his own right, he said, what kind of man is this? Like, what kind of individual is this? Like, how amazing is this person that you have this person Muslim and how he exists? قال أبو عمر عن ابن المبارك المستملي سمعت إسحاق بن منصور يقول لمسلم بن الحجاج لن نعدم الخير ما ألقاه الله للمسلمين. So here, Ishaq, again, same individual, he says that I will never give up. I will never give up on there being good in the Ummah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam as long as you are here. And he's saying this in his face. And he's praising him to his face. Again, Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, he is also a shared sheikh with who? Who else did he teach? Come on, you're not going to do that. He's also one of the Imam Bukhari's teachers. He's also one of the Imam Bukhari's teachers. He's one of the people who actually he supported Imam Bukhari and he told him to go write his Ṣaḥīḥ. Ishaq ibn Rahawayh. One of his teachers, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab al-Farraq, كان مسلم من علماء الناس وقوي أهل العلم مع المسلمين. That Muslim was from the scholars of the people. He was from the scholars of the people, and I did not know from him except what is good. Ahmad ibn Salama, he said, Ahmad ibn Salama, this is the same one we had spoken about before, that said that was with him, and he traveled with him to many of these different places. Ahmad ibn Salama was up, he says, رأيت أبا زرعة وأبا حاتم يقدمان مسلما في مخرج الصحيح على مشايخ أصلهما. And this is very telling. Abu Zur'ah was a very famous Naqid, a very famous hadith critic. Abu Hatim, Razi, both of these individuals are considered to be top tier compilers. They're considered, they are in their own right to be very top tier critics of hadith, and they said that they would put Imām Muslim in front of them when it came to narrating the Sahih hadith. And why is that? Because Imām Muslim, he had put together this book where he's collecting all of these Sahih narrations from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And which brings us to why it is that he, rahimahullah ta'ala, actually wrote this book. Why is it that he put it together? And we'll talk a little bit about this. He mentions it in his Muqaddimah, and let me just mention a few lines from it, inshallah. He says, أما بعد فإنك يرحمك الله بتوفيق خالق ذكرت أنك أمرت بالبحث أن تعرف جملة الأخبار المأثورة عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم في سنن الدين وأحكامه وما كان منها من التمارض والإيقاع والترغيب والترهيب وغير ذلك من صنوف الأشياء بالأسانيد التي بها نقلت وتداولها أهل العلم فيما بينهم فأردت أرشدك الله أن توقف على جملة مؤلفة مصارة. So here he says that the reason that I put this book together is because what? You requested. You requested for me to put this book together, and we'll get back to this inshallah, but there are two major reasons that he wrote it. One reason is this, is that he made a very special, a very clear request on why he was requested to put this book together, to write these hadith and bring these Sahih hadith together. Why was this so strange? What was happening before this? So those of you who might be a little bit familiar with how the Sunnah was compiled, why is it so interesting, or why is it so unique that we have now a hadith that have been written, that have been collected, that are called Sahīḥ? What is unique about that?
Okay, so while possible, right, there were fabricated hadith, right, there were fabricated hadith around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were definitely there, but the scholars of hadith were there, right? The scholars of hadith were there, and they were actually taking out these hadith that were weak, and they're saying, no, this is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't say this. So what was unique? What do you think was unique that was happening with Imām Muslim Ṣaḥīḥ? What happened here? What kind of change was there? Do you think there was a shift in the type of writing? Because before this era, we had something called the Musannafat. You guys know what Musannafat? Musannaf al-Bukhari, Musannaf ibn Abi Shaybah. What would happen in these Musannafat is that they would collect everything. So not only were there hadith on the Prophet, who else do you think they were reporting from? Who else is important? The companions, right? So they would report from the companions. Also, they would report from some of the tabi'een. They would report from tabi'een. Anything, because if you look at their works, you talk about 27, 28 volumes for books that are older than this. So older than Imām Muslim Ṣaḥīḥ, you had significantly longer works. You had significantly longer works. Slow down. Can you come down? Yeah, please. Hold on. And the brothers who are sitting in the back, if you guys could just please move up. Some of the sisters want to come and sit in the back. So, Imām Muslim Ṣaḥīḥ is unique because this is an era, or this was one of the few changes that had happened. Imām Bukhari was a scholar that was requested to write the Ṣaḥīḥ. Imām Muslim was requested by his friend and his compatriot to write the Ṣaḥīḥ. And why was it unique? Because you finally had a book where, when I opened the book, what is the only thing I would find? Prophetic statements. I didn't have to go through Fatawa of the Sahaba. I didn't have to go through statements of the Tabi'een. I didn't have to look for all of these things. And sometimes it would include some hadith that were weak. Or sometimes things were conflicting. Right? So you have these large voluminous works that were there. But now, what did that happen? I can open up a book and I can find all of these hadith that are attributable to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, what series of books follow the Ṣaḥīḥ? So Imām Bukhari and Muslim are kind of known to pave the way. They've paved the way, they've collected all of the prophetic statements, they've collected all of the authentic hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what books came after this? What are the famous books of hadith that you guys are familiar with? Imam Tirmidhi's Jami. What else? And Imam Tirmidhi is a student of who? La ilaha illallah. When Imam Tirmidhi, very famously, he reports from him, Qāla Abu Muhammad, time and time again. Who is Abu Muhammad? Bukhari. Other than that, who else did he report from? Who came also in this time period? Abu Dawud. So you have Imam Tirmidhi's Jamis, and you have Abu Dawud's. Abu Dawud famously called what? What do we call it? What is the name of the book? Sunan Abi Dawud, right? You have Sunan Nasa'i, Sunan Ibn Majah. Ibn Majah is a little bit different, so we'll talk about that another time. But Sunan Abi Dawud and Sunan Nasa'i, what did they do now? They took these are the same hadith, but they focused on what? What did they focus on? They focused on ahkam. They focused on those hadith that had to do with rulings that are concerning halal and haram. Like, what is the difference between Imām Bukhari, Imām Muslim Ṣaḥīḥ, and we'll include Jami' Tirmidhi in there? We call these books jawam', we call them jam', we call them collections. Why? They have everything in them. Absolutely. Right? These books, they have everything in them. They cover all of the different issues. So in it, you'll find Kitab al-Imām. In it, you'll find Kitab al-Raqa'ih, right? Heart softeners. You'll have all of these different issues that are covered that you won't necessarily find in books that focus specifically on rulings concerning halal and haram. Some of the famous mu'allifat. So what is the most famous book that Imam Muslim wrote? It's not a trick question, I promise. It is Ṣaḥīḥ. Right? Ṣaḥīḥ Muslim is Imam Muslim's most famous work. He also has a book called Al-Asma' wal-Kuna. So, names and nicknames. Why is that important? Why would you have a hadith scholar have a book where he has names and nicknames? Absolutely. MashaAllah, very good. So when I look at a chain of narration, is it necessary that this person's name be written the same way every single time? No. Sometimes it'll be written another way, sometimes it'll be his nickname, sometimes it'll be his kunya. A kunya in Arabic is like, for example, my eldest son's name is Ṣaḥīḥ. So my kunya would be Abu Ṣaḥīḥ. And this is a kunya. So what would happen is sometimes instead of using Farhan, they would use Abu Ṣaḥīḥ. And this is why it's important to understand when we look at somebody's name, that we understand what his kunya is and what his name is to make sure that it is to make sure it's the right person. So I'm able to identify them. Al-Tabaqat. Al-Tabaqat, basically a tabaqat is a generation. So when you look at people generationally, and what era did these people live, I will put them in what is called a tabaqat. And a tabaq in Arabic is what? It's like a plate, right? So you would have one layer on top of another, and he wrote this book called Tabaqat to make sure, again, so now these are all books that help us identify narrators. If I understand which tabaqah, or which layer an individual lives in, it will help me direct and determine if this person and this person lived when. If it's possible that they lived at the same time. Because if I have someone narrating from the first level, and then the next person in the chain is narrating from the third level, is it possible that they could have narrated from each other? No. Right, so you need that connection there. And again, this is all for identification purposes.
Century difference?
Yeah, so it's not so much a century because people don't live 100 years. And on top of that, is it possible, for example, has Allah blessed you with grandchildren? So that's 3 generations within 100 years. So a tabaqat is more so like a G, or more so like a generation, because it's very possible that you have narrations from a father, a son, and a grandson. And all of them are going to be in the same generation. So it's more of a differentiation in that sense and in that way.
But what is the context?
Oh, what is the content here? It's when did they live? So when you talk about tabaqat, and if you talk about the ula, that these people lived in this century. With tabaqat al-thaniya, they lived in this century, in this time frame. So tabaqat al-thaniya.
Whatever
Yes.
from that generation, this cannot be proof that he's...
Yeah. So if you have someone, for example, from tabaqat al-ula, tabaqat al-thalitha, if you have someone from the first level and someone from the third level, it's not possible that this person knows that. So this is again, it's about identification and identifying. The first book, same thing. The idea was to pinpoint the individual. This one was to pinpoint the time frame that he actually lived in. The next book that he writes is called al-Tamyiz. Al-Tamyiz, differentiation. Differentiating what? How many people in here are named Muhammad? Is there multiple Muhammads in here? What do you think?
Yeah.
Probably. Right? There's a good chance that there are multiple Muhammads or multiple Abdullahs. Like, how do I know which Muhammad is which? Or how do I know which Abdullah is which? Sometimes it can be last, sometimes you have Muhammad ibn Abdullah. And it's the same name. So there are different markers that we use to identify people. And Imām Muslim, what did he do? He wrote this book called al-Tamyiz to help differentiate between narrators that might be confused. Because yeah, he's Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and he's Muhammad ibn Abdullah, but he's Khurasani and he's Mahdi. So yes, they have the same name, but they live in different places. Another one is, another book that he wrote is called al-Nawawī al-Muhaddithin. What is Waham? Waham is like a confusion, right? Al-Nawawī al-Muhaddithin, that even a muhaddith can be what? Mistake. Even a scholar of hadith can make a mistake. So where do you record these mistakes?
Where do you record?
You have to, right? If a scholar of hadith makes a mistake, how do I know he made a mistake? Can we just overlook it and forget it? Be like, oh, everybody makes mistakes. If a scholar of hadith makes a mistake, this becomes more problematic. Why? It's not because he's one of the people who's narrating on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we have to take extra care. So what did the scholars of hadith do? They wrote these books of Waham. He wrote it, but he's not the only one. This category actually became a more famous category of what we know today to be ilm. Ilal. So a illa, or a defect in the hadith, part of it is wahm. And you will find this. You can say, well, this person narrated on this person, on this person. You can, and they say, وَهَذَا وَهْمٌ مِنْ شُعْبَةٍ. And this is a mistake that Shu'bah made. He thinks that it's like this, but it's actually not. Al-Mufradat al-Wahdan. So this is a very famous category of hadith. So basically what happens is that if I only have one chain of narration, is it easy to rely on that chain? If I have one isnad, for example, if I have a hadith that has 10 isnad, and they're all saying the same thing, is it easy to rely on this? Absolutely. Hey, what if I only have one chain? Why? What is the problem? Even though everybody's truthful, upright, love it, right, they're all precise, what is the problem that can happen in this singular chain?
Authentication?
I'm sorry?
Authentication?
Application?
No, authentication.
Authentication? Okay, where? Where's the problem? Why can't I fully authenticate it?
There's no some other support.
Okay, there's no support. Why is that a problem though? If I know these people are truthful, and they're all... Huh?
You cannot verify it with the cross-reference.
Okay, I can't cross-reference. That's definitely a problem. But why is it important to cross-reference? What is the category we just spoke about before? Well, can somebody still make a mistake? If somebody is religious, if somebody is precise, somebody has good memory, somebody is trying to narrate on the Prophet ﷺ, and he himself is a truthful, upright, religious person, there's still a possibility of what? There's still a possibility of one making a mistake. And this is why these chains in themselves, they became extremely problematic. What happens is that these type of hadith, they actually become famous later on. But why do you think they become famous? Because after all the hadith are gathered, right? If all the famous hadith are gathered, what am I as a muhaddith going to want to do? Right? I'm going to look for what? I'm going to look for those unique things. I'm going to look for something that the other people don't have. And this surge, it became a surge that is known as the Bathan al-Baraka. Right? Those strange, unique hadith. To the point where you have two major scholars who've written on this subject concerning Fara'id. One of them very famously, Imam al-Darqutni. He has a book called al-Fara'id. And you have also Imam al-Tabarani in his Mu'jam also. So Imam al-Tabarani has three books. Right? He has Kabir, al-Awsat, and al-Saghir. Al-Awsat is his collection of strange, unique hadith. So for those of you, if you find a hadith and it says, and Tabarani narrated in his Awsat, all of a sudden a red flag should go up, okay? A red flag should go up because the purpose that Imam Tabarani actually wrote this book was to show that these narrations are unique and they're singular and you don't have supporting evidence for them. The other book by Imam al-Darqutni, unfortunately, has been lost to us, but you have Imam al-Maqdisi, he actually collected them in his book called Al-Taraf al-Lawa'id. So that's how it still reached us, and we still have that to us today. مَنْ لَيْسَ لَهُ إِلَّا رَاوٍ وَاحِدٍ. That whoever, the individual who only has one narrator. Why is that a problem? So we had talked about not having corroborative chains. Why is it a problem to only have one person narrating one? Because before it was a problem with the chain, now it can be a problem with what? The method? No. With this one, what is the possible issue?
Can you make a mistake?
Huh?
You can make a mistake.
How do I verify the narrator? If I only have one person narrating on him, how can I find out about this narrator? It becomes very challenging. Even the most famous narrators that we have today, how do we know about them? Because multiple people narrated from them. The more narrations a person has, the easier it is to what? To judge him as a narrator and to see if he's good. Hey, this person only has one hadith. What do I do? It's a problem. Or just like we had a problem with the hadith that had one chain. Like, what if we only had this narrator only has one chain, or he only has one student? This becomes very difficult to verify who he is, and it becomes very difficult to authenticate him and determine what his status is. Do you see the scientific methodology that Imām Muslim has employed here? You see all of the different sciences that he's employed here to help him verify how authentic these hadith are and how logical hadith sciences are in and of themselves. And this is just one author. This is just one author who's gone through meticulously in pointing out the mistakes, in pointing out the difficulties, in pointing out the individual chains. And after all of this, he has his Sahīḥ. How many hadith did he choose from? You guys know? How many hadith did Imām Muslim choose from in order to put his Sahīḥ together? He knows, and he mentions it. He says, I sorted through 300,000 hadith. I sorted through 300,000 hadith to come together and gather these hadith in this book that we have in front of us today. And it comes in different, there are different prints, which I'll talk about inshallah. But like this is the Al-Tayyiba print, which is a pretty good one. This is in 2 volumes. The Al-Tafsir print is in 8 volumes. The Tuq al-Najat is like in 4 volumes. So you have multiple different prints in different ways, but in general, this is how the book is organized. Like, he died 261. He died 261, and he was 55 years old. Rahimahullah ta'ala. His Sahīḥ was something that was accepted by all the hadith scholars of Islam. He was one of the few scholars who actually wrote his Sahīḥ. He was able to present it to others, and the hadith scholars, they accepted it. They said, this book is solid, this book is sound, and this is the book that we accept. And what is the name of this book? Sahīḥ Muslim. Sahīḥ Muslim is what we call it. Do you think he would name the book after himself? Let's just think about that logically. For somebody who's so pious and somebody so sincere, wouldn't he really name this book after himself? No, right? It's difficult. So there are other ones too, like Muslim business stuff. So most likely it was after that. There are a number of scholars, so Ibn Abdiyah, and I'll mention some of the names that they used. So one of them, this is a very famous one by Ibn Abdiyah al-Alai. He said, "Al-Muslim al-Sahīḥ bi-naql al-'adl 'an al-'adl 'an Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam." So al-Musnad is what? Something that is connected. Al-Musnad is something that is connected. Al-Musnad al-Sahīḥ. Al-Musnad al-Sahīḥ meaning the Sahīḥ, the authentic chains that have been narrated by Adl and Adl. Adl is somebody who is upright, somebody who is righteous, and this connected upright chain has been narrated from one to another. An Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In other words, Al-Musnad al-Sahīḥ al-Mukhtasar min as-Sunnah. So over here, Al-Musnad, same thing. These connected chains. Al-Sahīḥ, authentic. Al-Mukhtasar, condensed or abridged. What do you guys think about that? Huh? It was Sahīḥ, yeah, for sure. But I'm saying Al-Mukhtasar. He said that this is abridged. This is a short version.
He excluded the companions and the 300,000.
So he did. He excluded a lot of the hadith. He excluded a lot of the hadith. Why? Because could he have included more hadith and more chains? Yes, he did. But why did he leave out? Why did he leave them out? Did he collect all of them? Okay. Okay. So now I'll take it a step further. I say he chose certain Sahīḥ hadith. Right? He selected certain hadith. Why did he include one?
Others already included.
Well, he was the first one to, like, after Imam Bukhari, he was the second one. Al-Fikra, there's a book that is considered Sahīḥ before Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim Sahīḥ. Which book is that? Al-Muwatta. But why is Al-Muwatta considered a book, a collection of Sahīḥ?
Because it includes all of those hadiths, and they hadiths, and they also presented to the others, other scholars, and they also accepted the Sahīḥ.
Who rejected Imam Malik's Muwatta? How come Imam Muhammad? Yes, Muhammad. Right? What does Muhammad mean? It's a collection. Right? It's a collection. It's a collection that he put together. And not just that, did he intend, like Imam Muslim intended, to put Sahih Hadith? Or he didn't have to worry about it? Even problematic hadiths, were they in Medina? Like they were in Kufa and Basra and Khorasan? The science of that hadith, where did it originate? You guys know? It originated in Kufa and Basra. It didn't originate in Medina. Why? What was going on in Medina? Right? Not just like the companions' kids, you know what I mean? Like their kids and their grandkids were there. It wasn't really a problematic society, right? You know what I mean? So you still had some righteousness. You didn't really have liars. There weren't too many societal problems and issues in Medina. Most of the problems were on the forefront. So he didn't need to sift the way that Imam Bukhari and Imam Muslim had to go through their Sahih. Another al-Muslim al-Sahih al-Mukhtasar. So now the names get right, the book is shorter, but the names getting longer. Right? So Muslim Sahih al-Mukhtasar, right? So this is the book, connected chains, authentic, abridged, that has been narrated from a adil, from somebody who's righteous to another righteous, all the way back to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Sahih al-Musnad binaql al-adil al-adil is another one. Kitab al-Sahih binaql al-adil al-adil. As-Sahih by itself. This is also a bit narrow, like this is what some of the scholars have said this. From this, you have like a number of scholars who actually back this one. You have Ibn Nadim, you have Hakim, Khadim Baghdadi, Khalili, Sam'ani, Ibn Asakir, Ibn Nuqta, Ibn Lathir, Imam al-Nawawī himself, al-Mizzi, Ibn Kathir, al-Bukhari, al-Dhahabi. So all these are like very famous hadith scholars, and they kind of back this one. Al-Jami', what is a jami'? We mentioned this before. What makes the term a jami' unique? Yeah, a jami'. It collects all of the different chapters. It collects all the different chapters, not just different rules. But one of the ones that a lot of people have settled on is this one, al-Musnad al-Sahih al-Mukhtasar من السنن بنقل العدل إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. I think that's it about. What makes Imam Muslim Sahih different from Imam Bukhari's Sahih? Who knows? Like Imam Muslim, he only brings a hadith. And Imam Bukhari, sometimes he'll bring statements of companions. Sometimes he'll bring a hadith. He himself doesn't seem to be Sahih, but he uses them to justify certain chapter headings. Imam Muslim doesn't do any of this. Also, Imam Muslim doesn't have chapter headings. How does he organize his book? He organizes his book into kutub. So he'll have Kitab al-Imam, all of the issues that have to deal with Imam, he'll mention them. But he's not going to have different chapter headings. He'll have Kitab al-Salah, but he won't talk about the different parts of Salah. Then these chapter headings that we have today, where did they come from? You guys know? They came from the Shurah afterward. So very famously, Qādī Iyyaḍ and Imām al-Nawawī. So what they did is they put chapter headings on the hadith, and because they put the chapter headings on the hadith, these are things that have been carried on to us and down to us until today. You have some of the scholars of the Maghrib, so what is today like modern day Spain. Some of the scholars, they actually preferred Sahih Muslim over Imam Bukhari's Sahih, and this was the reason. They say it only has a hadith on the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in it, and this is why it is the preferred book. The most famous shuruhat, or the most famous explanations of Imam Muslim Sahih, al-Mu'lim, Riwayat Muslim, this by Nazri, is probably one of the first earliest ones. You have the Imām Muslim by Qādī Iyyaḍ, which is one of the books that we have mentioned, so they actually take some of the chapter heading from him. You have an explanation by Ibn Salah. So Ibn Salah, he only does Kitab al-Imām, he actually doesn't do the entirety of Sahih Muslim. He discusses a little bit of Muqaddimah, and then he jumps into Kitab al-Imām, and then he stops there. It's called Siyam to Sahih Muslim. And then you have al-Minhaj. Minhaj is one of the most famous shuruhat, or one of the most famous explanations of Imām Muslim Sahih. And this explanation is, it's considered a mid-tier explanation. It's not very long, and it's not very short. He relies very heavily on two. One of them, Imām Muslim, by Qādī Iyyaḍ. And the second book, it's actually been lost. The second book has actually been lost, which is called al-Tahrir, fi Sharh Muslim, by Abu Muhammad Ismail al-Asfahani. So Imam Nawawī, he relies heavily on him. He actually narrates, and he brings a lot of his statements in his explanation. Ikmal al-Mu'min, li-Hubbi, and then there's Hukman, Ikmal is Sanusi. There are two modern explanations for Muslim. One of them is Fath al-Mulhim by Bashir Ahmed al-Uthmani, and another one, Bahr al-Muhit al-Hujjaj by Muhammad Ali Adam, who I had the opportunity to study with and who passed away, I believe last year or the year before. There are two or three, there are a number of scholars who've actually done mukhtasarat, who've actually abridged Imam Muslims even further. The most famous of them is al-Mundiri, and also you have al-Qurtubi, who both made mukhtasarat, and both of them have explanations on them. So Qurtubi, he did at least of Sahih Muslim, and then al-Mufhim is the explanation of that. And then you have Sayyid Hasan Khan, who is died, I believe, in the 12th century Hijri, who has an explanation also of Mukhtasar al-Mundiri. Then you have Mustakhrajat. So Mustakhrajat are basically a hadith that have chains that go to the same text that are in Imam Muslim's Sahih. So what do you think the benefit of a Mustakhrajat is? So if I have a book, and I have a bunch of chains of narrations, and I have a bunch of ahadith, and then I have different chains of narration that go to the same ahadith, these books would be considered mustakhrajat. What is the benefit of these types of hadith? It's possible. What else? So the brother said that it's possible that it'll bring more hadith that bring more differentiation. What else? You're going to say something? It's further validation, absolutely, 100%. So this allows me to bring more corroboration, right? I can actually corroborate more with the more chains that I have, and it shows us, and it gives us insight into some of the hadith that Imam Muslim didn't use. One of the most famous ones that was written later was Qādī Iyyaḍ by Hakim, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And then there are a few theses and books that have been written in this time around Imam Muslim's methodology and how he approaches hadith. Imam Muslim Manhaj fi Ṣaḥīḥ by Dr. Muhammad al-Rahman Qawālidah, I believe his name is, and Manhaj Imam Muslim fi Ta'dīl fi Jami' Ṣaḥīḥ. This is written by Hudayfa Sharif al-Khatib. This was a PhD thesis in Jordan University. Also, Manhaj Imam Muslim and Hajjaj fi Dhikr al-Akhbar al-Mu'allala min khilal Kitabi Muslim Ṣaḥīḥ by Ashur al-Dihni, and this was a master's thesis that was written in Jami'at al-Hajj, al-Khadr, Badr, I think is in Algeria. But these are most of the works and a lot of the things that have been done around Imam Muslim's work. There are a few books that were written about, they actually criticized Imam Muslim's Sahih. So there are certain hadith that were criticized in Imam Muslim's Sahih. The first of them, Al-Juz'i al-Hadith fi Kitab Sahih Muslim al-Hajjaj. This is by Ibn Shahid, a very famous scholar. Al-Ilzamat al-Tatabbur by Darqutni, also a very famous work. Al-Ajwaba, Amma Ashkal al-Shaykh al-Darqutni. This is written by Ibn Mas'ud al-Dimashqi. All of these, again, they point out there are about 12 hadith or so that were considered problematic to some of the scholars of hadith, and 12 out of, we're talking about 12,000 hadith that Imam Muslim narrates. And even some of them, they're problematic. There's a PhD thesis that was written by Rabi al-Madkhali called Bayn al-Imamayn, Muslim, and he actually talks about how Imam Muslim he was still right in the way that he brought it. He was actually mistaken. التدبير على أوهام الواقع في صحيح مسلم هي علي حسين محمد الغساني الجياني. He also wrote again some of the problematic hadith that he found. غرض الفوائد المجموعة في بيان ما وقع في صحيح مسلم من الأسانيد المقطوعة للحافظ رشيد الدين بن حسين يحيى بن علي بن عبد الله الغفار. And the last one, تنبيه المؤمن بمحاماة صحيح مسلم لأبي ذر أحمد بن السبت بن العجم. So these are all the famous books that have been written around, well not all, but this is just a snapshot of the famous books that have been written around Imam Muslim Ṣaḥīḥ. Inshallah, from next time, we'll be talking about the introduction of Imam Muslim and the reasons that he wrote his book and a little bit more explanation of why he put his book together. Allahu Akbar.